You don't need to be perfect to be enlightened. You don't need to do anything to deserve enlightenment. You already are worthy of who you are just by the virtue of who you are, of what you are. And that means you don't need to hold yourself to some perfect standard that can only be imagined but doesn't actually exist. This is your self-judgment that makes you feel separate. So you can be imperfect. You can be as you are. You can be human, living in this duality and having all the idiosyncrasies, the eccentricities and imperfections of being in this world, and still be enlightened. Enlightenment does not mean perfection at all. At all. Enlightenment is the acceptance of your divinity while being imperfect. It is the humility to recognize your imperfection and not push yourself to be perfect in any way. Humility. To recognize that even though you are God, even though your true nature is divine, you also have this human aspect which is bound by time and space. You are going through a human experience, even though you are spirit. And this recognition brings balance. Otherwise, our minds have a way of kind of trying to grasp this self-concept of ourselves as a particular thing, a story, uh, a beautiful idea, fantastical idea, which is fixed. Yeah. But when you have this open and loosely held idea of who you are, which you don't fully believe, just enough to function in this world, because if you go to the DMV, you know, when they ask you for your license and they ask you for your name, you can say, oh, this is my name, this is my birthday, this is who I am. So you can function in this world, you can interact with others, and at the same time you can have the deeper understanding of your divine nature, recognition of your spiritual self. while honoring your human self. So, your ego, identity, self is then replaced by what is known as a caretaker personality, which is an ever evolving, free, and open and humble way of looking at things. Humble not in terms of like small. Humility is really the ability to see the full picture. Yeah. The ability to see things as they are. The ability to see your divinity and at the same time your humanity. And that changes everything. Then you don't need to fight with yourself all the time. Beat yourself up whenever you have some regret. Oh, I said this thing, it was so awkward in the office. How am I gonna show my face again to my coworkers because I did this whatever face palm moment? Right? You recognize that you made a slip up. You were human. Hmm. And you don't let that tarnish your image of yourself, because you then recognize, with all the things that are going on, with all the mistakes you have made, with all the beautiful ups and downs that you've been through, experiences that you have gained experience as this human. Otherwise, how would you learn? How would you evolve? How would you experience this grand journey, this adventure of going away from your fullness, on this exploration of limitation while being unlimited? And this is what it is. You are exploring what it means, what it feels like to be separate from your fullness, from your divinity. That is why you have the contrast to understand now your blemishless divinity. Your true divine nature is untouched by any of this. Even if you have committed the greatest sin, even if you judge yourself to be the worst, even if you feel completely unworthy, your divinity is still untouched by any of that, untainted by any of that. It is, that is the greatest and most freeing thing to know. That is the good news. That is why God can forgive you no matter what. That is why in many religions you see the concept of forgiveness from God to be endless. unconditional forgiveness, unconditional love. Give that to yourself. Give that to yourself. You don't need to wait for God to give it to you because you are God. Give that to yourself. Really. And the next time you catch an aspect of you being so harsh on yourself, beating yourself up for something so tiny, and criticizing yourself or others. What you do to yourself, you do to others. Notice that. Notice that. Catch that before it is believed and more power is given to it. Catch that and see it in the bigger context of the unconditional love and forgiveness of your divinity, and see how small that is and how that can be held in that divine love. How that can be let go. And when that is let go, you will come back to your divinity. You will see again and again that this human nature is okay. All is well. It's okay. All the greatest saints, all the characters that you read about in scriptures of all different religions, none of them were perfect. In fact, some of the greatest characters that you hear of, because of their imperfections and recognizing their imperfections with humility and surrendering to God, because of that recognition, that is the transformation that happened, which made them into a saint. That is the value of confession in some religions, because you're just in front of God, and it's not to another human. The priest there is just there as a listener, a witness, so that you have the opportunity to do this, but you can do this to in your own mind because God is always listening. Yeah. Because your awareness is always aware of what is going on. And you can bow down in front of your divine nature and repent, you know, It's not repentance in terms of how some people interpret it harshly. Hmm. This is the true, deeper meaning. Hmm. Sometimes in mainstream religions, these concepts are like pushed upon you and used for control and used for gaining power over people in some way. And that's not the true purpose of these teachings at all. Yeah. The true purpose is to mm, come back to humility, to see that even though you are imperfect, even though you have made some mistakes, you are still worthy mm, of divine love. Mm, mm. When you surrender and when you recognize those mistakes, because otherwise what happens is our ego just continues to try to protect itself, even saying even the worst mistakes are justified about, you know, in its own mind. It can create a story where mm, mm, it protects its own worldview. And even the biggest imperfections it takes and says, I am still perfect. This is the egoic perfection mm, of somebody who does not want to recognize their humanity. This is what you see in mm, mm, people with big egos, is that they can't really take feedback. Mm, mm, mm. Feedback, when it is given, it's important to give it lovingly with a constructive and forgiving and um, with a deeper intent of helping somebody. Mm. Mm. Because it makes it easier for somebody to receive it. Mm. So it's all about compassionately doing the best you can for somebody else to mm, see in a in the way of humility. Hmm. But in society, it can be really complicated. Human life is really complex. And even when we have the best intent, it's sometimes hard to put down the ego. Mm. And it's important to recognize that. Otherwise, we would still be chasing perfection in spiritual ways. That would be spiritual ego. Mm. So, for example, when I have posted content earlier and somebody writes a really bad comment, mm, at first it hurts to read something like that. Mm. Especially when it comes from a lot of misinterpretation or when I have some really good intent and I say something, and because people don't have the full context of what is happening, they just take one word or one sentence and have their very strongly opinionated idea, and they just judge you um, very quickly. Sometimes people can see something for 1 second and already make up their mind so quickly. They have no time to investigate deeper, to see where your heart is at. Mm. So it does hurt in the beginning, mm, at least. Mm. But mm, that is how you learn, you see, and you recognize that people are coming from their own ideas, and sometimes it's nothing about you at all. Yeah. And sometimes there is some truth in what they're saying, yeah, to whatever degree, sometimes more, sometimes less. Hmm. Hmm. So it's good to introspect. Hmm. Hmm. No matter what you hear from others, it's good to introspect and see if there is something you can do to see things as they are, to come back to the way of humility. Hmm. 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 But be careful not to internalize their judgment. Hmm. Be careful not to take it to heart and be hurt, because people can be really harsh and even have bad intent, and especially when they don't know you and they don't care about you yet. They can say things that mm, mm, can cause harm if you really take it at face value. So hmm, hmm, it is okay to be imperfect in this imperfect world and be seen in your imperfect ways and be pointed out by somebody. Hmm. Hmm. Because they see you imperfectly through their imperfect filters. Hmm. But even while all this imperfection is going on, hmm, that perfect divinity within you can stay untouched. That is the point of this. Hmm. 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 And when we recognize each other's divinity, hmm, then even through these imperfections, there is a common denominator where we connect with each other from lovingly. Mm. As allies in spirituality, in spirit, we commune mm, in that perfection. Mm. Yeah. Mm. I hope all this made sense, and mm, this gives you mm, the permission, if you needed it, to be as you are. Mm. To recognize your beauty in your perfection, like the Japanese concept of wabi sabi, putting together a broken cup, mm, lining it with gold, holding it together. Mm. to show the beauty in that imperfection. Hmm. That is wise. Hmm. 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 And let this give you permission, if you needed it, hmm, to accept your enlightenment. Hmm. 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 Even in the presence of all this imperfection. Hmm. To see the light. Hmm. Even in these shadows. Hmm. Hmm. Let this allow you to accept, hmm, the fullness of your divinity. Hmm. Hmm. Let it express through you, through, hmm, all the beautiful varieties, hmm, of human expression that you have. Hmm. So subtle. Hmm. How through our humanity we can express divinity in so many ways. It's wonderful. It just brings so much joy to my heart to see all the varieties of expression. Mm. Even if I'm like scrolling through social media and see just the ingenuity and variety of how the divine can express, it's mind-boggling. The creativity, mm, the beauty, the love, mm, 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 mm. and and all the things which are not, mm, the most beautiful, which are not the most loving, which are not the most, mm, compassionate, all that too. Mm, mm, mm. All different aspects, like your own mind. Your mind is a reflection of that. In fact, it's the other way around. Hmm. The one divine spirit that you are. Hmm. There is nobody else. Hmm. There is nothing else but one consciousness expressing itself in all these varieties. So the external world is really an internal, hmm, hmm, experience, hmm, which is seemingly projected outside. That is the deeper truth, but it may be too abstract and maybe too much to understand at this point for most people, and it's okay. Mm. You don't need to get all of that. So just love yourself as you are. Forgive yourself. And know that you are divine. Mm, mm. And know that you can be enlightened. Mm, mm. If you want to go deeper, I have made this full guide to enlightenment. Hmm. So you can watch that here. So I'll link it right here. I invite you to watch it next. Thank you. Namaste.